Welcome to SuperTalk Outdoors from the Foundation Studio right here on Biloxi's Back Bay. I want to welcome you to this wonderful celebration of Mississippi, where we do this every single Monday at lunchtime, because as I say every week, this is the capital of the outdoors in America. We are so lucky to have so many amazing world-class, abilities here. And the opportunity to enjoy the outdoors in Mississippi, just incredible. I want to thank you for joining us on the powerful SuperTalk Mississippi Radio Network on SuperTalk TV at C-Spire TV. Or you might be watching the show on YouTube or Facebook, or you might be listening on your favorite podcast. So it's August the 21st, 2022. As I remind you every week, the views on this show are mine, not those of the Foundation. So when it comes to the outdoors and outdoors issues, you can count on me to say what needs to be said. I'm going to do my homework, and I am super honored to be in this position. I've got a history book that's emailed to me every day that kind of gives me a sense of some of the most important things that have happened in our history. We've been talking a lot about Hawaii, for example, and Hawaii became a 50th state in the U.S. in 1959. Of course, our thoughts and prayers are with those who have had to endure the fire there. Just truly unfortunate. But those of us in coastal Mississippi who had to deal with the worst natural disaster in American history, we can really relate to what those people are going through. But I ran across this quote from Wilt Chamberlain, who incidentally I had the opportunity to meet on one of my many trips to Miami when I was working for Knight Ridder, the former parent company of the Sun Herald here in coastal Mississippi. And what I can tell you about Wilt Chamberlain was he was a nice guy, but he was so tall you couldn't make eye contact with him. He was just so incredibly tall. But anyway, he said this. He said, everything is habit forming. So make sure what you do is what you want to be doing. And I can assure you, man, that when I picked fishing to become habit forming, or hunting, or enjoying the outdoors, I picked the right thing, and I know you did too. Some people don't appreciate what that habit forming thing is all about, but we try hard to teach them, and if they learn, if they're lucky enough to learn, then they fall in love with it too. It becomes a habit for them as well. That ring of fire heat dome that's sitting over the middle of America right now and extending down to the Gulf Coast, man, it is unbelievable. It's actually 93 degrees in coastal Mississippi, but it's supposed to ramp back up in the north of 100 with heat indexes much hotter than that. But coastals here in coastal Mississippi, we're kind of okay with it because it is also a hurricane shield, a tropical system shield. So as we're doing the show, we're looking due south of us and seeing that tropical system developing that's headed into Texas. So we're okay with it. But if you look at the like 7 to 10 days out, you see rain chances come back again, and that means the heat dome is beginning to relax a little bit. And, it could be a busy end of the hurricane season. We hope not. We're ready to get to the fall. Speaking of the fall, we've got work to do up in the Mississippi Delta, but man, it's hard to even think about going to work on a food plot in this kind of heat, man. I mean, it's just incredible. But we'll be up there soon and doing what needs to be done because we've got a lot of work to be done. We've been putting it off, but we got to go. Speaking of working in the heat, I want to give a quick shout out to our farmer friends across Mississippi who are working so hard as we speak, harvesting their crops. And for the crops that are not ready for harvest, their irrigation efforts are in full force. There are so many pumps running across Mississippi as we speak. We can nearly hear them in coastal Mississippi. Farmers sow the seeds of incredibly hard work and dedication and resilience. Man, I talk about their resilience here on this show all the time. They're nurturing their land, even in this heat. And for those who are taking the corn out right now, they've had, in most cases, incredible crops. And they're nurturing that land in a way that's leading to bountiful harvests that's going to sustain us all, man. The farmers across Mississippi are feeding the world, and Man, we are lucky to have them. That is for sure. So now let's shift gears and move over to my new friend, Bryant Haley, who's a fisheries biologist for the Department of Wildlife, Fisheries, and Parks. Had the opportunity to visit with him. I'm surprised he actually hasn't been on the show yet, but I got to know him pretty good before we started the show, and I look forward to introducing him to you now. How you doing, Bryant?
Doing great. Thanks for having me.
Well, it's good to have you here. Look, Bryant is doing some important work as it relates to invasive carp on the Tenn-Tom, and we'll come back to that in just a second and talk more about it. But tell me about where you grew up, Bryant.
Well, I grew up in Hernando, mostly. Moved around the southeast a little bit, but spent the majority of time there. And then out of high school, transitioned to school in Mississippi State. So I moved down to Starkville, and I've been in Starkville for almost 10 years now. Left for a little bit when I went to work for the agency. Started in the Central District office out of Turcotte, and then I moved back up here. My wife's still a student here. Met her in grad school, and she's moved out of a master's and on to a PhD, still in Mississippi State. So we're here for a little bit.
Good for her. Good for her. You know, you mentioned to me before we started the show that you like canoeing and you do a little bit of hunting. Went deer hunting a few times last year. You like to fish. But who in your life, early in your life, gave you a love of the outdoors?
Probably blame it on my grandfather. He was a big time fisherman. That's all he wanted to do when he retired, and he got me on boats. Got my dad set up with a boat so he could take me out and get me even more hooked on it when I was younger. So pretty much every family gathering we spent fishing. He had a place up on Pickwick, just a little place, couple John boats there, but that was all he needed. He'd crappie fish every day if he could.
Yeah, that's so exciting. Yeah, that's kind of my story too. But listen, I hunted with my dad and fished with my dad, but my dad worked a lot, and so my grandfather's, my grandfather on my mother's side, his name was Dusty, and my grandfather on my father's side, we called him Papaw. And man, they loved to fish. I mean, we score hunted, you know, we did some basic hunting together, but man, their love was mostly fishing. So every chance they got to go fishing with me, they took me. And man, I look back on those times. It's amazing how time flies, but what a gift that is that he gave to you, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely.
And you take that with you today. So when did you find out, you know, that becoming a biologist was something you wanted to make a career out of?
Oh, I don't know. I guess I just seeing them out on the water. Turns out those were mostly game wardens that I was seeing, but you know, at the time I was young, I didn't know the difference. Just seemed like such an incredible job to do. You know, be on a boat all day, have an excuse to be out in nature, not always sitting behind a desk. Turns out we do quite a bit of sitting behind a desk too in the job, but we spend a good bit of time outdoors. It's a great mix.
Yeah, it is cool. So when you went to Mississippi State, did you go directly into biology?
I did. I pretty much had that locked in from the start. I wanted to go into fisheries, so I tailored classes, and they were great about letting me do that, letting me take as many fish classes as I could, and stick to that path. So I got a lot of experience, met a lot of people through those classes, introduced me to my first jobs. I worked as a tech on a project that was actually going on in Puerto Rico at the time. We did a lot of fisheries work down there, which you wouldn't expect through Mississippi State having that island connection, but we did quite a bit of work there.
Well, the program, let's face it, Mississippi State's program, certainly we hear it here on the show all the time, the number of people at the Department of Wildlife, Fisheries, and Parks that went through Mississippi State. And, you know, some went on to get PhDs in other areas, some went on to get masters in other areas with other schools. But Mississippi State, man, has made its mark on the Department of Wildlife, Fisheries, and Parks. And the inspiration from the professors there and the major amount of projects they're involved with, really all over the well, I could probably say the world.
It's the world.
It's remarkable, isn't it?
My advisor, my master's advisor, has currently got projects in Vietnam and Cambodia, as well as Mississippi. He's spread all over, and you could say that about most in the department.
So you got your degree, and you went on to get a master's degree. What was your master's in?
also in fisheries.
So, so you got super educated, and you joined the department 4 years ago.
Yes.
And so tell me more about what you did when you first started at the department.
So I started off in Turcotte, as I said, around Jackson. That office focuses a lot on Ross Barnett. We do a lot of plant management there. There are a couple guys that's their full-time job is spraying, and mostly on Barnett. So anytime we weren't particularly busy, we would jump on the boat with them and lend a hand.
Hey, let's do this. When we come back on the other side, we'll pick it up from right there. But we're having
Sure.
a conversation with Bryant Haley. He's a fisheries biologist. And when we come back on the other side, we'll finish his story, and then we'll talk a little bit about Asian carp and some of the work that's happening now as we speak over the Tenn-Tom waterway. We'll see you after this break.
I'll carry on, Mississippi.
Conversation on Mississippi's outdoors. It's SuperTalk Outdoors with Ricky Mathews on SuperTalk Mississippi.
Mississippi.
Welcome back to SuperTalk Outdoors here on SuperTalk, where we celebrate Mississippi's incredible outdoors. And one of the great things about this show is I get an opportunity to meet so many people, both inside the Department of Wildlife, Fisheries, and Parks, and really across the country, who are making their marks to make enjoyment of the outdoors better here in Mississippi. And, you know, having conversations with people like Bryant Haley, who's a fisheries biologist at the department, is something I really enjoy doing because it gives me a chance to put the spotlight on them so they can share their education, their passion for what they're doing. And the department is literally filled with people like Bryant who are working so hard to make a mark. It takes a village to create the kind of model that Aldo Leopold talked about, the North American wildlife model. It takes a village to think about it, to make sure that we're doing the right thing, that we're keeping conservation efforts front and center, so that it gives us all the opportunity to make sure the populations are healthy, our waterways are healthy, and this state continues to be the capital of the outdoors in America. So Bryant Haley is a fisheries biologist with the Department of Wildlife, Fisheries, and Parks. And when we went to break, he was talking about when he first came into the department, he actually had the opportunity to do some work up on Ross Barnett Reservoir. And that was a great opportunity for you to sort of wet your whistle right off the bat, wasn't it?
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
So where'd you go from there?
So I moved into the Northeast District. So based up in Tupelo. We manage the Tennessee Tom Bigby Waterway, manage Pickwick, Bay Springs, and then a number of state lakes around the Tupelo area, mostly, and state park lakes.
World-class waterways, though, wouldn't you say?
Definitely, without a doubt.
So you're focused a lot these days on Tenn-Tom. Before we talk about invasive species, and we're kind of lucky so far, but we'll talk more about why that might be. Tell us about Tenn-Tom for people who are not familiar with, they've heard Tenn-Tom, but they're not really familiar with what it is.
Okay, so it's a 234-mile navigational waterway that connects the Tennessee River with the Mobile, the navigable portions of the Mobile anyway. So it's designed to improve shipping. It's got a number of locks, all with navigational locks. A number of dams, what I meant to say there. And quite a few of them have very good recreational fisheries that have established in the lakes that were created by damming that waterway. I'm 20 minutes in Starkville, where I live, from Columbus Lake. We did some sampling there this fall and saw the best population of bass that we've seen in years on that lake. Some great fish. Same can be said for Aliceville, just south of it, Aberdeen to the north, both, really good fisheries. They don't get quite as much attention as Pickwick and Bay Springs do, which, everybody knows of those lakes in this area, and they're very consistent, good fisheries in the state. I
have a friend of mine who actually went up to Tennessee to get a boat, and he brought it back down. He's from Mobile, so he brought it back down to Mobile. And he went to the full stretch of the Tenn-Tom, and he posted, pictures along the way, and where he, these little discreet little places where they could get some gas or fuel, and maybe stay for the night or whatever. But it was a fascinating experience for him, and it was awesome watching him have that experience. But it really gives you a sense of the vastness of the outdoors we have the opportunity to enjoy here in Mississippi when you traverse the entire length of it. Have you had the opportunity to do that?
I haven't done it all in one stretch yet, and I would love to. That's been a long time goal, figuring out the logistics of that. Right now, I've just got a little John boat, so it would take a while in my boat. I'd have to borrow something from a friend with some sleeping quarters to make that a little more comfortable.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, this time of year, we maybe an AC included in that. So, listen, we're going to talk real quick about the invasive carp problem. I posted a video that a friend of mine, a farming friend, Travis Dunn, and his family experienced, on an offshoot of the Yazoo about 6 months ago. And man, the carp were just piling into the boat. It got viewed thousands of times. Kids were screaming and laughing, and his wife gets hit in the face by one. It's you were saying to him before the show started that it's a bit of a lost cause for those waterways, anything that's connected to the Mississippi River. But you're saying that there might be some hope for the Tenn-Tom.
Right. It's hard to totally call it a lost cause. We're certainly putting in the effort. We're trying to get some people to harvest fish over there, but there's just such a connection with those oxbows to the Mississippi that anything that comes up and down that river can get into them. And so they'll probably be dealing with carp to some degree, no matter how much effort we put into removals. But on the Tenn-Tom, we haven't found any yet. They're in kind of large numbers on the Tennessee River. Pickwick has quite a few. And we do every year a multi-agency effort. So TWRA, Alabama is there, a bunch of federal agencies, Fish and Wildlife Service, USGS, TVA. We all get together and line up a bunch of shock boats across coves and push and collect as many as we can and put tags in them. And we have a receiver array set up around the mouth of the Tenn-Tom, down the Tenn-Tom a bit, and then there's pretty good coverage in Pickwick, so we can see where those fish are moving. And we're not seeing any coming on down the Tenn-Tom for whatever reason. And we don't know 100% what the reason is. There's not much flow through Bay Springs. It's pretty still until below Bay Springs a lot when we start getting some tributaries in and further down the waterway. And they tend to move with flow. So the current best theory is there's kind of that buffer pool of water that's keeping them out of the waterway, keeping them separated, not giving them incentive to move through it. So we're pretty thankful that we're not seeing anything. And we do ask anglers, and we've got signs up. We're currently trying to put up more signs at all the accesses on the Tenn-Tom, saying, hey, please report any sightings of these fish that you have. If anglers could do that for us, that would be extremely helpful. Letting the agency know if they see, particularly a jumping carp, anything that jumps a couple feet out of the water or more, it could be a silver carp, and we'd like to know about it.
So talk about why it matters. Why is it important that Tenn-Tom doesn't have any species of carp yet? Why should we be focused on the spread of invasive carp?
Well, one of the bigger reasons is just their effects on native fish. They're a big plankton feeder, big filter feeder. So we're talking about the bottom end of the food chain. That's food for our shad, for our juvenile fish, or prey fish like bluegill. That's what they all need to eat, reproduce, and do well, which provide the forage base for our bigger predators that people like to catch, our bass, our catfish. So we're concerned about potential for those fish. Oh, and also other filter feeders like paddlefish that we've got in there. Disruption to those fisheries due to just reduction in plankton.
Do they spread rapidly because they just are prolific, or do they spread rapidly because they're not a sought-after species?
They spread rapidly because they're prolific and because plankton's everywhere, so they can live in a variety of environments. They can find the food they need just about anywhere. It certainly would be great if they were considered more of a desirable food fish and we could get people, harvesting and eating them. I have eaten many of them myself. They're very good, actually. They take a little bit more effort to clean than a crappie does, but the meat you get off of them still high quality. So don't write them off from a food fish perspective for sure.
One of the things that we have here in coastal Mississippi, a little bit controversial, is the pogie boats. The pogie industry they're catching pogies for cat food mostly, and I guess they use it for other things as well. But has there been any exploration into, is there a way to use Asian carp for cat food and other animal food?
Absolutely, it's great protein, and that's being done in several other surrounding states. We currently have a law on the books, and it was just proposed to try to modify it, saying that we can't transport an invasive species across state lines, and that was intended for live invasive species, but it's also, as it's written, applies to dead species. So because we don't have many processors in the state that can handle those fish, anyone who harvests them here would like to be able to take them across the state line to processor Louisiana and Tennessee. So we're trying to change that reg to make that legal, so those fish can be used.
Yeah, that really makes sense. That is for sure. Hey, listen, Bryant, we're out of time for now, but it's been a pleasure to meet you, get to know you better. Keep up the good work, and we'll stay in touch with you. If you find one, let us know.
Great meeting you as well. Thanks for having me on.
You bet. This has been Bryant Haley, who is a fisheries biologist from the Department of Wildlife, Fisheries, and Parks. And when we come back, we got Scott Baker going to join us, and we're going to talk about a lot of things, but dove season in particular. We'll see you after this. Welcome back to SuperTalk Outdoors. Hey, listen, I really enjoyed that conversation with Bryant Haley. Once again, just a great reminder of the wonderful people and dedicated professionals that work at the Department of Wildlife, Fisheries, and Parks. And we get a chance to celebrate them here on this show every single Monday. Hey, I want to bring your attention to something. Todd Atkins, who is the Vice President of Governmental Affairs for the Sportsman Alliance. It's a national organization focused on protecting our hunting and fishing and trapping, rights for future generations. He joined me last week, and if you missed that show, you can go to YouTube or Facebook or your favorite podcast to get it. And we talked about some changes the Biden administration has put in place to stop archery and other outdoor training in schools, and it's a real problem. And they, Todd and his organization, our outdoors community, actually needs your help. So go listen to that conversation. I think you'll be glad you did, and I think we ought to all better stay tuned to ways the administration is sort of letting their anti-hunting and other anti-gun activities really try to get in our way of enjoying our outdoors and our Second Amendment rights. So go pay close attention to that. Now let's shift gears and move over to my friend Scott Baker. I'm really looking forward to having Scott because I haven't had him on the show in a while. He's he's a wildlife biologist for the Department of Wildlife, Fisheries, and Parks, where he's been for over 25 years. And I really enjoyed visiting with him last time. We're going to talk about dove hunting and other things, but before we do, we'll just say good morning or good afternoon to Scott. Excuse me. How you doing, Scott?
Rick. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, I was talking about my friend Todd Atkins that I talked about last week, and great conversation, and have so much wonderful access to professionals across the United States that are working to help us make our conservation efforts the best they can be so that we can pass from one generation to the next what we're able to enjoy here. And, you've had a long career doing that, but man, it takes a village to pull this off, doesn't it?
Oh, it does, Ricky, and it's exciting. We rarely do the same thing 2 days in a row. And in the Department of Wildlife, Fisheries and Parks, and any type of wildlife management, it's year round, every day. The season changes, but even during the season, post season, the heat of the summer, we're always preparing for the next hunting season. So it's a great opportunity, a great job, and appreciate your efforts and advocating for us.
Well, you bet. I'm honored to be here. Listen, you spent a long career in public land habitat management. When I think about Mississippi, and I often say this on the show, that our forefathers were brilliant in the way they set aside so much land for public use, and then more recently, developing the Phil Bryant Wildlife Management Area. But this effort to put aside so much land for public enjoyment. It's one of the reasons why Mississippi is the capital of the outdoors in America, but we've done a great job with that, haven't we?
We have, Ricky, and we've got an opportunity, or there is an opportunity out there for anybody for hunting and fishing on public lands. Even when we're talking about fishing, oftentimes we think about our large lakes and reservoirs, but we oftentimes on these inland wildlife management areas are some good fishing opportunities. Sometimes it may be a lake or a pond, but also small rivers like the Strong River that flows through Bienville National Forest, and other streams that somebody may want to wade and fish on. A lot of opportunities for fishing, but most definitely hunting. That's in my wheelhouse. But I'm a user of our public lands, and I understand how important they are. If a person wants to wake up on a Saturday morning and go hunting during the hunting season, there's somewhere that they can go.
Yeah, it's amazing, man. I mean, there are a few places like this in the world where within 10 minutes, you and I could be on public land somewhere and doing something, as long as it's legal, doing hunting or some type of enjoyment. It's it's something. It'd be easy for us to take it for granted. I think some people probably do take it for granted, don't they?
They do, and we all do. At times we get accustomed to how easy to access, close proximity to home it is, and I appreciate our leadership in the Department of Wildlife and Fisheries, on up to our legislators and governor, understanding how important it is to protect public land and to purchase it, to get more of it whenever we can. And so we're always looking to add additional land to our our inventory, and it may be adjoining a current wildlife management area or may be a new property altogether. And during my 25-year career, we have added over 10 wildlife management areas across the state. And the one you mentioned, Phil Bryant, WMA, the large acquisition in the Mississippi Delta. But we've added a lot of acres across the state, and we're always looking to add some more as long as financing allows.
Yeah, and then I had a terrific conversation with Lieutenant Governor Delbert Hosemann. Let's see, last week actually. It was my show that used to air on the coast is now airing on Thursdays in the Jackson and the Delta markets. And Delbert had a terrific conversation, but during the break we talked a little bit about the Outdoor Stewardship Trust Fund that we worked for 2 years to get done. Had $10 million the first year. This past legislative session, excuse me, they put $15 million in it. He says his goal this year is to get $20 million in it. And when you think about with the $10 million we got this past year, we had over $30 million in matching funds. When you can turn $10 million into over $40 million of investment into outdoor enjoyment, imagine what the matching funds would look like at $20 million. So we'll do like Georgia did, take $20 million and make it $100 million. It's incredible what we have the opportunity to do. And now Mississippi's actually got a fund that we can draw down these federal and local and state matching dollars to be able to do all kinds of amazing things to enhance our outdoor enjoyment. So state's moving in the right direction. As you point out, the legislature gets it. The governor signed that bill into law. And, we always have challenges. We always have challenges that will need legislative support, whether that be a new law to forbid something from happening, or maybe we've got an old law on the book that maybe needs to be wiped off the books, or maybe we need funding to achieve something. I think the one thing, whether you're a Democrat or Republican or wherever you stand with your politics, the one place that we can usually, agree is when it comes to the outdoors. And I think Mississippi definitely gets that. You said that really well. Anything you want to say about that before we shift gears?
No, Ricky, but one thing. Well, I say yes. One thing we face quite a bit from hunters is our regulations on wildlife management areas. They do appear complex. When you open up a regulation brochure, they look overwhelming. When somebody calls and I get to speak to them, and I tell them, I said, well, we have to put so many common sense features in the black and white, and it's like don't litter. Well, we have to put that in a regulation. Or don't drive a nail into a tree. We have to put that in a regulation. Don't block a gate. We have to put that in a regulation. So most of it is common sense, and I don't want people to be scared away by the rules and regulations. But most of the things that they would normally do on their land or somebody else's land is the same on our wildlife management areas. We just have to cover everything we can, those regulations, make sure people abide by them and protect them.
I think it helps that you do that because as a result, people tend to follow the rules. That's the good news. The majority, 99% of outdoorsmen in Mississippi on public land and on private land, they follow the rules. They leave it the way they found it. They really focus on handling a firearm. You know what's interesting about the firearm is that I don't care how trained you are, you can always drop your guard. And I had a friend of mine who talked to me about, he shot a deer, and to make a long story short, he thought he saw the deer move, so he loaded his gun and took the safety off and was about to shoot, and then the deer fell. But when the deer, it clearly died, he didn't need to shoot it again. Well, in the excitement of the moment, he forgot to put his safety back on or take the bullet out. So he walked his four-wheeler to get the four-wheeler, and he had a shoulder rest, and he was taking his gun off his shoulder, and he just barely touched the trigger, and it went off. And there was no one there. It went into the woods, and no one was hurt and whatever. But he told me the story, and he said, "My goodness, buddy. I mean, what if my grandkid would have been with me, or one of my friends who often hunts with me would have been with me? What could have happened?" And this guy is super trained and super careful. The point being that we can all drop our guards, and it's good to be reminded. That's all I got to say about that. It's good to be reminded of safety all the time, isn't it?
That's right. And most hunting accidents occur by veteran hunters. It's not the new hunter out there. And it's just like what you said, it's an accident. We drop our guard. We don't think. We need to be in the habit of constantly checking the safety, be mindful if it's loaded or not and where we are. But you're exactly right. It happens to the best of us.
Well, and opening that breech, making sure the gun is unloaded when it's in your truck. Another friend of mine, the gun was loaded in the back of his truck, and it shifted in the back of the truck and blew a hole in the side of the truck. But unfortunately, we hear these stories a little bit too often. And so, again, we can't remind ourselves enough about this. Hey, when we come back on the other side, we'll talk about the upcoming dove season and remind people what a baited field is and what a baited field isn't. With Scott Baker when we get back. We'll see you after this.
Mississippi to this land called home. I'll breathe Mississippi till I'm dead and gone. Just carry on. I'll carry on.
We live in one of the best places in America to enjoy the outdoors. So let's talk about it. It's Super Talk Outdoors with Ricky Mathews on Super Talk Mississippi.
Welcome back to Super Talk Outdoors. I have my friend Scott Baker with me. He's a wildlife biologist and someone I really enjoy spending time with. And one of his passions is dove field preparation and dove hunting in general. One of the farms that my friend, who we lease farms from, they planted a long row underneath the power line of sunflower seeds. And man, the sunflowers are just absolutely doing amazing. I got a note from one of my friends who's up there helping him right now and driving one of his trucks for the harvest. And he said, "Man, I've never seen so many doves." But if you prepare, man, they're there, aren't they?
That's right. And Ricky, dove field preparation actually starts back in April, May, June with planting sunflowers or brown top millet are probably the two most popular crops. And we often get questions from people this time of the year of how can I fix a dove field here the few weeks prior to dove season? Well, you're really too late. And the next question people ask, well, what about, can I put weed out? And a person, if they're putting weed out for a food plot, cover crop, soil erosion, prevent soil erosion, and it can be done as long as it's for those reasons. And it has to be done in an approved agricultural fashion, which is normally the planting rate, about 90 pounds to the acre and evenly spread across the field. But I tell you, when people start pouring grain out of a bag this time of the year is generally when you can go from a good legal field to an illegal field. Now is not the time to be pouring grain out of a bag, and that's generally when trouble comes about. But when you do plant that field in April, May, June, you can manipulate it however you want to. You can bush hog, disc it, burn it, spray it, anything under the sun for doves that way.
And there's some wild seeds too that if you can't put them out, if it's too late to really create the kind of field that you'd like to see, all bets are not off, are they?
No, and that's a great point, Ricky. You can manipulate some wild seed. It may be foxtail, broadleaf signal grass, even a cut hay field that people are cutting like for Bahia. But all can be great dove fields. And those type crops, you can manipulate those however you want to. Only thing you can't do for a dove field, almost anything, is if you harvest a crop, you cannot take that crop back out and spread it on the field. Like you're talking about your farmer friend in the Delta that's harvesting crops. He's probably harvesting corn right now. He could not take grain from the combine and take it back to the field and broadcast it and hunt over it. But there's no reason to, because there's going to be enough lost grain behind that combine that makes a great dove field on that cornfield. But so managing for doves is very liberal. I know we get to the question or kind of criticism how challenging it is debating laws, and it's really not. I know I work in it every day and familiar with it, but for a planted dove field, you can manipulate it however you want and be legal to hunt over.
Well, and so the bottom line is that if here we are in August, and dove hunting season right around the corner, bottom line, there's basically nothing you can do at this stage of the game to get legal for the dove season.
People ask about wheat specifically, and on a prepared field, wheat could be distributed as long as it's for the purpose of a food plot, a cover crop, winter grazing. It can be done that way, evenly spread about 90 pounds to the acre. But if you're taking wheat out there for the sole purpose to hunt doves over, no, you cannot. Yeah. Dove hunting has to be a byproduct of another or normal agriculture practice that wheat's being used for.
So when you look at the population of dove in Mississippi, is it healthy? How are we doing?
It is healthy. Overall, we manage dove the same way we do waterfowl as far as, we got flyways for waterfowl. And so for doves, we have, it's called management units. And we have, the eastern Mississippi and the central and the western. And so we're monitoring population across all of those regions. And the dove numbers have declined some, but they're stable or actually a little bit higher this year. We're still a healthy population, but we do manage them and look at the numbers of them. And Ricky, I'd like to talk about, if we got a little bit more time, about what a hunter should do.
Yeah, please do.
If they see a conservation officer on the field, what's the response of the hunter? Do we have a little bit of time to talk about that?
Yeah, go ahead, please. Yeah, do a summary of it.
We were talking about safety on the break, and that's the number one, utmost important. If you see a conservation officer come across the field, don't be shooting at low-flying birds. And really, if you could just pause your shooting long enough for him to come check you. He wants to get in and get out as quick as possible. As you like to do, Ricky, open that breech so you can the officer can visually see the gun's not loaded at that time. Set your gun down. What the officer don't want to do is he'd rather not have that breech closed. He don't know if the gun's loaded or not. And then when the hunter's swinging with the gun, you don't want to rake. I always keep it at a point in a safe direction. And the best thing is set it somewhere safely, muzzle pointing up if possible, and let the officer, check your hunting license, count the number of birds that you have, then he'll be moving on to the next hunter. But don't feel like you've got to be hunting all the way up to the second that the officer's walking up to you, because safety's number one out there.
This has been Scott Baker, wildlife biologist from the Department of Wildlife, Fisheries, and Parks. Have a great day. And as I always say, stay safe in the outdoors. We'll see you next Monday. God bless you.